its members, and I'm super curious to know if anyone has any historical knowledge on the conversation that happened that led to that.
Hey, Taylor, I can answer that. I thought that perhaps Colin had answered you by email on that topic, but because this is the precursor to an elected board, it would, have that same requirement. So elected positions don't allow alternative voting members. And Allison Keene probably knows a better answer.
I think that's the accurate answer. And
Tammy,
there's nothing to stop someone from sitting in, like I see Taylor Steenblock, but doesn't count for the quorum.
And we have, Councillor Rosenthal with us today, who's sitting in for the duly appointed member, and we appreciate you being here, Garrett. Thank you. But
well, I would suggest we get started with the content, and then we can do the votes after 3. I think it's 3:30 that stuff is available. I can't recall. I need to double check.
All right.
I can't get a hold of Mary Helen.
Okay, and so let's take roll call of the members that are here, at least.
Nancy Hendrickson.
I'm here.
Eric Mueller.
Here.
Dave Ripma.
Here.
Corky Collier.
Here.
Mary Helen Kincaid. Not here. Tanny Stephenson.
Here.
Eric Molander.
Here.
Ed Washington.
Here. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I can't get my face on the screen, but I can hear you okay. And it's pretty clear on my end, so that'll work fine for me. Okay.
We can hear you as well, Ed. Thank
coming
you.
through really
Okay.
strong. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Bob Salinger, not present. Heather King.
Here.
We have 8 members present, and we do not have a quorum.
Okay, so this is the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District Board meeting for July 20th. And at this time, we are 1 member short of a quorum. And so we will move to item number 4 on the agenda. And this meeting is being recorded.
And Mr. Chair, if you could lean closer to the microphone, that'd be great, because you're coming through as a whisper.
Okay, gotcha. Thanks, guys.
Colin, I think you're up.
Thank you. Hi, Colin Rowan, Director of Planning Public Affairs at MCDD. And today we have an agenda item to discuss, basically solicit some feedback from the board on potential legislative changes, or how to go about defining potential changes that are needed for our operating revenue. And so we've been working with Echo Northwest and our municipal partners over the last couple of months to collect additional information as we've been working towards alternative means of generating this operating revenue. And we brought to the board a memo on privilege tax, and we've talked about other means of using the assessment within the managed floodplain. So that's what is currently used with the legacy districts property assessment, and then the privilege tax, which would be for the entirety of the district, which is all of Multnomah County in the urban growth boundary. We know that we can't make these decisions without getting your feedback. And we also know that you can't make those decisions without the analysis of what the impacts would be. And so today, what will help us refine our questions and really to get Echo Northwest giving you the information that you need to help make decisions. We have a series of questions that we'd like to walk through with you. We also know that to seek any of the legislative changes that could be considered during the 2024 short session, that we're going to really need a specific proposal. And so This feedback will also help inform the specifics of that proposal, so that we are able to have a consensus among your board, but also be able to bring that to the different municipalities and hopefully to the Oregon legislature. So let me share we have one slide. It has all the questions on there. And what we'd like to do is to give you as the board as much time that we have on the agenda to be able to move through some of these questions and dig into it so that we can come up with a better proposal and have better analysis to share with you. Okay, so we have, and recognizing there's a lot of questions on there. So we did organize them in a way to really help us focus and be able to bring information back to Echo Northwest. So kind of top loading some of those questions. But I can read through some of these questions and I'm going to leave time. We don't have to get through all of them today, and we can do some follow-up and give you additional time to think about it and provide written feedback if that is preferred. So to begin with, this is to dig into the flood safety benefit tax, or that's really the privilege tax that applies to all customers in the district. And the first question is, who should be required to pay the tax? The cities or Multnomah County or individual accounts? And so that is really the question is, who's being billed? Would the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District be billing the cities for their proportion? Or would they be, would the Urban Board actually be doing the analysis for specific charges to individual accounts or individual customers?
I think we're hoping for any conversation, questions, thoughts that you all might have. So should the district charge the cities and the county? Or should the district charge individual customers within the district?
Eric Molander.
So at this point, I really don't think that we have enough information about it. The series of questions I would be asking is, what is the difference in the cost to bill under each of these scenarios? And if we are asking the city or the county to bill on our behalf, what is their cost to recover that from the individual accounts? The second element is who's responsible for bad debt. In the case of us billing individual accounts, it's pretty clear that we are the billing agent, and therefore any delinquent account would be our responsibility to collect. If it does go to the city and or county or some municipality, is there a responsibility for them to pursue collection on our behalf? Final element is when we say who should be required to pay the tax, is what rights do we have to enforce that? Do we have the right to lien? Do we have the right to take collection action against people that have not paid? So I'd like to see some of those elements, even in broad brush, but putting some real numbers to it so that I'd be able to say which is the better approach. Thank you.
That's really helpful, Eric, and that actually fits well with what, and we'll refine some of this as we go through these questions, but kind of in that broad brush, asking Echo to take a look at sort of, to give you as board members those comparisons, especially at the sort of municipal level versus the individual account level. So I think all of those are really great questions for us to drill into and provide you with additional analysis. Thank you.
Okay. Eric Mueller.
Okay. I guess as I've thought about this since some of the discussion earlier on, whenever it was previous meeting, I'm thinking about it from the standpoint of there's a district-wide privilege tax, and then there's another revenue mechanism. I hesitate to use the word as it relates to specifically to the floodplain, which would be a separate category. So in thinking about the district-wide one for flood safety, in my mind, the realistic and I think more defendable approach is to take it from the standpoint of we figure out what the total dollar revenue that's supposed to be generated from this. It's divided by the total population of the district, and then each of the jurisdictions is sent a bill for a privilege tax equal to the total number of their population times, whatever that per capita rate was. That way it's a consistent methodology across the entire district, so that we don't have a differentiation of how it's handled from one jurisdiction to another. How those individual jurisdictions then choose to either add that as an operating cost in one jurisdiction, whereas another jurisdiction may choose to individually line item it out on a utility bill. That part can be, I think, to some degree customized, but for those jurisdictions. But the urban district simply sends an invoice to each city based on their population, the Portland State Population Center official numbers that, are used for all the various calculations that the state uses and so forth. And then as it relates to, the cost, I think Jim or Colin, someone in a previous meeting, there'd been a discussion or a conversation about, the construction excise tax being a similar, maybe somewhat of a model. And, there's IGAs that are established, which would be necessary for each of the cities and the urban district. And, within that, there's a responsibility only to, to administer that. And then, to receive there was an administrative fee that's part of that construction excise tax model, which then provides a degree of cost offset for those jurisdictions that are going to be then billing this. So, that's how I'm perceiving the district-wide flood safety privilege tax. Thanks.
Thanks, Eric. Corky?
Well, Eric summed it up in much better detail than me, so I will ride on his coattails. I will say that, a couple of these questions strike me as a little bit difficult to answer. So I circle back to, what are our goals here? And I think two primary goals for me are practicality and, most importantly, the fairness. And so if we can devise a system, a revenue collection system by charging individual accounts, if that is more fair than charging the cities, then so be it. I think it's the other direction. I think it's going to be more fair to charge the cities and counties and let them charge their population in the way that they see as best, because there are differences. Now, what I think is important here to do as we have this conversation is to convey the message that we're not trying to punt the decision to the individual cities. That's not our intent. Our intent is to recognize that there's very different geographies, and by geography, I mean human geography, including population, income levels, revenue, so forth. They're very different, big differences between the cities, and the cities are probably in a better position to design a revenue collection system that is most fair to their population. So what's fair for Portlanders is not going to be fair for people in Fairview. Yeah.
Thank you. Nancy Hendrickson.
Yeah. Okay. So when just clarifying who should be required to pay the tax. So this is the one that is for everybody. And, you know, the questions we've been wrestling with are who benefits, who pays, and who decides, right? So I guess we're the deciders. So there are just, okay, little question. There are several cities, and then there's part that's unincorporated, right? And so is that why it says city/county? Do you mean charge the whole county and Multnomah County just takes care of it, or charge all the cities plus the county where it's unincorporated? Can you speak to that?
The latter.
Okay,
Yes.
so then everyone is covered and the county has a small sliver wherever it's not a city. That's really helpful.
We do have a little bit of Milwaukee and Lake Oswego in the district as well, just for all y'all's recollections.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, and I think individual accounts, I'm pretty sure we're not talking about sending our individual bills because I believe that was really cost prohibitive. I agree with the population piece only because I think the outside of the managed floodplain, the geography is not as relevant, right? So a relevance of geography is like in or out of the managed floodplain. And I think inside the managed floodplain, we're sticking to the assessment authority at this time with this model. I don't know about the cap of 3%. I think that, you know, if we lowball it to begin with, and you know, we want this to be sustainable. I think that came up last time that we definitely need it to be sustainable infrastructure. And if we start low, because we know it's going to ramp up, a 3% cap might not be feasible. But I also know that a measure was just voted down that did not have a cap on it because people were like, wait a minute, this could be anything. So our voters are sensitive to that. And the thing about partners being required to implement the fee on utility bills, I'm really curious about that. What I would like to see is all the partners, city/county, be able to send it out in a consistent way. And if it makes sense to be utility bills, great, because that's probably the easiest way. But I guess I'm not sure. Just for now, I think I'll just hang my hat on the utility for right now, and really curious to hear from the other partners. And in terms of customer types being required to pay more than others and the low income discounts, I know for our utility bills, for example, we have low income discounts, and we would probably choose to pass that on in the same way. I think this is a really interesting conversation for this partners that are here to also weigh in on that, and I'm curious about that.
Thank you, Nancy. Taylor Steenblock.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. So I think this is a really interesting conversation. I know Colin and I have had a lot of conversations over the last year about utility bill configuration, both for this district, but also Multnomah County has been looking at something similar to this for a different purpose. So I think the questions I would add to the list are, you know, as we start looking at who pays, I think it's really important to understand how much they're paying and whether that's monthly or annually, and really looking at what is acceptable in terms of whether it is a regressive tax or not. I know Multnomah County, especially, we've been very sensitive to trying to make sure that if we did have a utility fee for a different purpose, for example, it's low enough that it's not going to be seen as an overly regressive tax. And I see the low income piece here. And the one other thing I would add is that we sought to potentially do a low income break for people with vehicle registration fees, and the cost to implement a low income reduction program within our vehicle registration fee collection was so high that it actually cost more than what we actually were getting in fees for that program. So I would just, as we start thinking about building this out, I would caution folks to think a little bit about the overall fee versus the low income piece and see if there's a way we can look at this more broadly to make it less regressive, but also not having the opposite outcome of what we're hoping to do here, which is fund the program. And then, I think having also worked really hard last session with a few legislators and legislative council to come up with a new utility fee that gets around Measure 5. I know there are certain things that trigger Measure 5, even if we're not doing a property tax, because something might look like a property tax. And as I look at this, I see the 3% cap, which is very similar to Measures 5 and 50. We see looking at this based on where people live, which I think is getting closer, especially if we start looking at a household as being the definition for who we're charging. And then if we come away from that, there's a balance district too of, okay, well, so if we're looking at charging an individual and we have, for example, a renter and they don't pay, what happens to them? Is it going to be the person who owns the property that's on the hook? I think there's a lot of complexity here that would be really helpful to get to kind of wade through and understand those details. Because I think as we start thinking about collecting this on the city and county level, if we have folks who are moving from unincorporated into an incorporated area or vice versa, it's going to be really hard for us to verify who lives where and really figure out how to collect this from those folks based on addresses without getting close to a property tax. So, I think this is really interesting. And Colin, I think, coming up with these fees is always going to be a challenge, especially with Measure 5, but those are just some of the questions I would add to the list.
Thank you. Eric Molander?
I want to reiterate something that we have talked about within the board, which is that we're interested in this being a progressive, not a regressive tax. So anything that ends up resembling something that's a head tax, a flat fee per household, really places the greatest burden on the smallest and least capable of paying of our citizens. The second element to it is when we talk about should some customer types be required to pay more than others, the answer there, again, goes back to some of our discussions around guiding principles, which is that the fee that we charge should be related to the benefit received by the entity. And in the case of some of our largest commercial enterprises, both within the floodplain as well as the managed floodplain, that what we're going to find is that it's really the commercial enterprises that benefit most from this. And so let's just bear that in mind as we start to think about that equity issue being tied to the benefits received. Thank you.
Corky Collier.
Quick question for Colin. The 3% increase, is that inclusive of inflation? We're talking about a cap of 3%, which would cover us for inflation, or is that in addition to inflation?
At least in this sort of black and white version, it would be a 3% annual increase, but I think that's what we want to solicit feedback. I think noting that that is similar to measure, compression increase as far as anything that would be construed as a property tax is a great thing to note. And then also, what do you do in the event of large jumps in inflation if you are tied to a certain percentage? If you want to have some kind of additional vote for that, I think those types of considerations are really important for the board to think through.
On that, I would say, I would suggest a cap of 3% on top of a federally recognized inflation rate. Because we've been doing 9% increases year after year. And if we have a 4% inflation rate, we're going to lose a percent, it's like, yikes, that could get us in a lot of trouble.
I guess it's your staff has been thinking that the board obviously wouldn't be required to increase it up to the cap, but would have to take a vote to do that. Just That's what we're thinking anyway.
Yeah, I agree. But give us that flexibility while still putting the cap in there.
We doing, Colin?
Doing great. I think, well, and Nancy and Eric Mueller started considering a bit of the second question, so it might be worth digging in a little bit more. I just want to time check. I think we still don't have quorum, so
We do
just
have
want to.
quorum.
Okay, and so just wanted to make sure that, and maybe Tanny as chair, if you could give us a little bit of a time definition of how long we should have the conversation to help us guide how many questions we can go through so we get to whatever vote is needed.
What do you think you can do in the next 10 minutes or so?
Yeah, let's go for another 10 minutes. And
Okay.
because at 4 o'clock, there is a board communication training that all board members are invited to. So I want to be respectful of that time. So yeah, the next piece that we did have on there was the geographical considerations. I think we had heard some good consideration around population. We've also been considering total geography, like acreage, as how that fee would be allocated. So wanted to open it up to the board to provide any additional input if you want, or we can also, since we have all the questions up here, please do bounce around a little bit more if some of those other topics need further discussion.
Oh, there she is, Nancy.
So
Hello.
just really quickly, Colin, because you might have this off the top of your head. You mentioned geography in terms of geography of jurisdictions, which hadn't been how I was thinking about it. So thank you. So if you do a fee allocation for these cities and county areas, is it markedly different if you just do like acreage or if you do population? Do you know?
I don't know. So I think that we
Okay.
need to come back with that. So, but it would, what we are currently considering would be, yeah, acreage by the jurisdiction. So thank you for noting that, because geography can mean a lot of things, especially as previously we were discussing other types of geography like watershed and things like that. And then the revenue piece, as we had considered it, would be the sort of net revenue and potentially on something like city utility. But again, that is really flexible and really just trying to open that up for conversation about what other options people as you as the board would like us to consider.
Okay, and I think that was in one of the slides previous to today, which was like revenue would be, percentage of utility receipts or something, like, and stormwater utility, for example.
Yeah, and
Okay,
that's similar to how cities apply a privilege tax to communications and electric and other utilities for use of right-of-way. The tax is based on gross revenues to those utilities. So that was, again, we're trying to come up with a range of options, get some feedback from you all on what you think makes sense. We think one of the challenges may be that the different partners that we're working with here may calculate those revenues differently. And so it may be more lumpy than some of the other methods that we might use.
and then just to one more thing, just to speak to the non-regressive nature of what we're looking at, I think that, how do I say this? I think that what's been brought up over and over is that the eastern cities over average are don't expect to pay as much as people in Portland. And so we saw this before in one of the analyses. It's like, however much the floodplain area is getting now, that burden should not shift eastward, because I think that is regressive. So if I'm right about that, I'm putting that on the table. Like whatever you're looking at here, we should be looking at, like, where does the burden shift to from where it is now? And I think it's important to consider that when we know the answer.
Thank you, Nancy.
I think we can, oh, sorry. I think we can ask, and we will ask ECHO Northwest to take a look at a few of these options, but just wanted to get as much feedback And I think that's really helpful as far as a lens to look at what those results are. Thanks, Nancy. Sorry to interrupt, Corky.
I think that boy, that sounds like a lot of work, but I like Nancy's suggestion there. I was thinking something along similar lines of what right now, what's the current revenue income to the drainage districts from the different cities based upon stormwater runoff. That's a part of this also, is what costs are we, the drainage districts, incurring from all that runoff. And I hesitate because it sounds like more work, but it would be interesting to take a look at that and see if we can somehow craft a fee allocation based upon not just population, not just revenue because we want to be progressive, but also based on one of the elements being that direct cost that we're incurring from that particular city. Lake Oswego would get a bit of a pass on that part of it.
Battle there.
I think we do have some, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was looking for my hand and I found my mute button. Can I go, Tanny?
Okay.
Okay, thanks. I really like the idea, what you're saying, Corky. And then at the same time, a little flashbulb is going off, like, don't get too complicated, don't get too complicated, because to me, that complication equals cost. So sometimes, and this might be one of those times. So I just put that cautionary tale.
I completely agree. That's why I was kind of going really slow and hesitant. Okay. I don't want it to complicate because that adds a cost. Also, you start to lose people too. You start to complicate it, and folks in Troutdale are saying, just tell me how much I'm supposed to pay. Yeah, I worry about that.
Okay. Eric Mueller.
Yeah, I guess I'm going the other direction. I think all the time and effort we've spent so far, it's clear that this whole effort is much more complicated than anybody ever anticipated, certainly than the legislature anticipated when they created this go figure it out project. I think we are going to end up with something that is complicated. And I guess I also, one of the complications or complexities, whatever you want to call it, as I tried to allude to earlier, I view there being two revenue sources. There is what I referred to in the beginning, which I talk about in terms of it being a per capita, or as Mr. Molander refers to it as a head tax. That being the flood safety cost per capita across the entire district uniform, that being just one revenue source, the other being the revenue source that is the replacement to the current revenue source of the property tax assessments. Because at least I'm under the impression that that is something that we need to move away from. We may not be able to do it one night from June 30th to July 1st on a particular year. So we may have to have, as part of the legislative changes, an ability to kind of phase out of that and phase into something else. But I see there being a fee that everybody in the district pays the same amount, and it's paid for by your city. How your city chooses to fund it and collect it from you or not is up to them. And then there's a separate revenue source. I hesitate to use, I don't want to say tax. I don't want to say assessment. I don't want to say fee because I don't know exactly how it's going to be configured, but that would be a charge that's going to be to those folks that are in the managed floodplain, similar to the fact that the folks in the managed floodplain pay now. That's going to have to transition, but it also gives us the opportunity, hopefully, to move away from the compression problem that we have in the managed floodplain through the property tax system. And if we're then able to collect in the managed floodplain without the difficulties of compression, we're then able to get, I hope, more of the revenue from those enterprises, as was mentioned earlier, commercial enterprises in particular, that are in the managed floodplain that are greatly benefiting from the work of the districts, without the distortion of the of compression. And they, being the significant beneficiary, are paying a significant portion toward the operation, just as they do now. So to me, there's two revenue sources, and that may not be where the staff or anybody else is going, but that's the way I'm understanding how we're going to have to fund this. Certainly not day one, but hopefully by the time we get done with some sort of phase-in period of 5 years or something. Thanks.
Thank you, Eric. Colin, how you doing? Do you have enough?
Definitely have a lot of really great feedback. And I think we can, well, we have a couple other hands up, but I think we can move forward with a lot of this, bring this to ECHO and try to incorporate into the work that they are doing.
Okay, thanks. And Eric, do you have a closing thought?
Yes, I just wanted to ensure that as we look at this, we recognize that there will be some legislative changes required, primary of which is giving our district something that SDIC has, which is the right to create an intergovernmental tax. And in particular, I think that this will have an impact on some of the commercial enterprises in Penn 2 and Penn 1 that are now considered tax exempt. But you would see in the future that PIR, Heron Lakes, Expo, Delta Park would be paying their fair share for flood safety. So we do need to have the right to levy an intergovernmental tax as part of these legislative changes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if no one has anything else.
Are we going to be sent the questions?
Sure, absolutely.
I mean, I didn't see it in the packet.
No.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I think I have my hand up. Maybe it doesn't show on.
It doesn't, but now you do.
It does not?
It
Oh.
was up there for a second, Ed. You got it right. Go ahead.
Yeah, just couple of thoughts. First, I appreciate everything that I've heard from everybody today, but I make sure I get these names correct. Mr. Eric Mueller, I appreciate, not that I don't appreciate everything that's been said, but his approach, his presentation style is, for me, it's very comforting, because I think that this is a behind biter. I mean, we all know that, but it's just the way it is. And I don't know how many ways out of this that we have, but I think that if we could just look beyond what we are doing, and I think that you all are doing the best job that you know how, and trying to cover all the bases. But I think that if we look beyond our small area here and look at what's happening all across this country, weather-wise, and if it's not heating up, it's wetting up, and I just think that we need to, it's our responsibility. But I think we are trying to address an issue that probably everybody in this country is going to have to address at one time or sometime or another. I can't say that I have the exact answer, but I'm willing to do what I can to make sure that we are doing something. And we can't always do everything we want, and we can't always please everybody, but you know, that's not why we're here. We're here to give it the very best shot that we can. And, but also being very much aware of the difficulty of this task. But I appreciate everything, but I just there's something about Mr. Mueller is just after hearing everything, there's a certain amount of calmness to his approach, and I think we have to be calm, but we have to be serious about it. So
Thank you, Mr. Washington.
thank you.
Seth Reeser.
Yeah, I just had a question on the idea of an intergovernmental tax. My recollection is our last discussion on this was more focused on exempting the cities from running into a privilege tax issue if it was collected on the utility bill. And so I was just, is there more information on what the proposal is in the supplemental materials for the intergovernmental tax?
I think it's your staff's best thinking that the privilege tax would apply to government entities, and on the floodplain, while property taxes don't apply to publicly owned land, property assessments do. And so the challenge becomes, what's the value of those properties if it's a wetland or a golf course or open space? But I do think we are intending that our proposal incorporate fees appropriate to the landscape based on the principles you all address here. So I'm not sure I answered your question, but
that's okay. I can just follow up with you offline for any additional questions. Thanks, Jim.
Great. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for that discussion. Let's go back to agenda item number 3, which would be the Pen 1 board position, which would be replacing James Allison, who recently resigned. And I think you all received the memo and a copy of Rachel's bio in your packets today.
Both James and Rochelle send their regrets as they're traveling today and they're not able to be here. We intend to do a more personal introduction at the next meeting. And I think Jim is prepared to answer any questions about Rochelle.
I think Nancy can also speak to that. So just have a board member do it because it's a board decision.
Okay, so James Allison has had to step away. He was on our board here. He was the Pen 1 representative, and he's actually stepping away from both boards. A new person is joining the Pen 1 board, needs to come up to speed. I think this new person is in Parks, City of Portland Parks, and is not able to take on the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District role. However, Rochelle Altman, who is currently a contractor with the City of Portland, knows quite a bit about this work. In fact, has been working closely with Mark Wilcox over the past year and a half, 2 years on moving forward with the PMLS, the Army Corps project. So Rochelle came to the Pen 1 board to say, I could be your representative. We asked her if she would do it, and she said yes. She's got a strong legal mind. She was originally trained as a lawyer, and she has worked in program management, project management, analysis, and coordinating capacities for the City of Portland. most recently in the director's office, and she's now contractor, and definitely has been also pulling the city team. We have a lot of bureaus over here. She's been pulling the city team together so that everyone understands what's going on with the urban flood safety water quality district. So she's kind of a key, has some really key information. She brings a lot of experience to this board here, and she would be liaising with Penn One. They've nominated her to be on the Urban Set Flood Safety Water Quality District Board. So I think it's up to us to vote her in or not. And honestly, both she and James are actually in the air right now. Otherwise, they would be here with us virtually. Is there anything you'd like to add, Jim or Colin?
I'd just like to say that Rochelle's done an amazing job herding the cats of the city of Portland and creating a very rigorous, very efficient process for us to walk through all the permitting and funding and other needs that we have when we're working with an organization as large as the city of Portland. She's been a terrific collaborator. She has federal experience and local government experience, both in DC and here in Portland, and she's been terrific to work with. So and Colin, you have more direct day-to-day exposure to her, but she's been the go-to when we don't know how to get an answer or who we need to reach, and she's been really effective in helping us navigate.
Okay, is this something everyone's prepared to vote on today? Oh, I'm sorry, Eric Molander.
Just a quick question. So she doesn't actually work for the city of Portland. Are there any conflict of interest issues? And who is CMTS LLC?
Well, okay, so CMTS LLC is the company that she works for. And she works for that company and is contracted with the city of Portland. We did go through our legal review and there are no conflicts of interest. And if there are, then they get brought up and dealt with at the time.
Okay, thank you. That's important.
Great.
Okay, Seth Reeser.
Yeah, just a question. What is there a time set on the terms of the contract? And my question's more of, I love contractors, but sometimes they come and go. How, if somebody comes on and gets onboarded, who controls that, whether or not that contract's in place and for how long?
Yeah, her contract with us is currently for 2 years and with the option to extend. So I think the uncertainty is pretty low there. I mean, anyone can get a different job at any one time. It's one of the reasons we were recruiting her basically to take on this role, because she doesn't need a lot of onboarding because she's very familiar with all the Army Corps project and the reason that we're having this governance change. So the onboarding amount is small and we're pretty sure she'll stay with us for 2 years. Anyone can move at any time.
Okay, thank you.
And as far as her service goes, it's at the discretion of the Penn One board, and they could pull that at any time if they chose to.
Exactly. Thanks, Tanny.
Sure. Okay, we prepared to take this on today? There's any more time.
Mr. Chair, I would move to approve Rochelle Altman for the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District position representing Penn One.
Okay. Second on that?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for the appointment of Rochelle Adams or Altman, I'm sorry about that. And Wendy, if you'd call the roll, please.
Nancy Hendrickson.
Aye.
Steve Fancher's absent. Eric Mueller.
Yes.
Dave Ritma.
Yes.
Seth Reeser.
Yes.
Ashton Simpson is absent. Lori Stegman is absent. Emerald Bolg is absent. Corky Collier.
Yes.
Mary Helen Kincaid.
I'm gonna have to abstain because I just joined, so I didn't hear the conversation.
Thank you. Tanny Stephenson,
Yes.
Eric Molander,
Aye.
Brent Cartwright is absent, Ed Washington,
Aye.
Bob Salinger is absent, Heather King.
Yes.
We have 9 yeses and 1 abstention. Motion carried.
All right, thank you. And with that, let's go to minutes. Did everyone receive a copy of the June 7th minutes for the work session for the board? And if so, do we have any corrections?
There was one
Yes.
correction made to Eric Mueller's name, made a typo.
Okay. Any other corrections for June 7th?
We can do them both at the same time as you prefer.
Okay. And hearing none, let's go to June 15th. Any corrections to those minutes? Okay,
Mr. Chair, I would move approval of the June 7th, 2023 work session minutes as corrected and the June 15th, 2023 board meeting minutes as submitted.
okay. Second,
I'll second.
okay, any discussion on that motion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that one carries. Okay, and with that, we will be going into our training session here shortly.
That's correct. That is set to begin at 4 p.m. So I believe Noah Siebel and Astor Moulton will be on at that time.
Okay.
If I may, Mr. Chair, thank you very much, Tanny, for chairing today. It was really appreciate it. And on behalf of the staff, I thought that I really appreciate the feedback and we'll keep coming back to you with more. This will definitely inform the analysis that Echo Northwest does. And so we will send out these questions and I look forward to more feedback and thank you for providing the direction. I think it will help us refine the information that we hope will give you the support you need to make good decisions. So again, really appreciate the tenor of the feedback today.
I was just gonna say, I appreciate the discussion and I know it's a lot to it. Is there any way to get these questions in advance at all? So we have a little bit more time to prepare.
We will do our best, Mr. Chair, and I regret not having them before you sooner, and I'll be accountable for that. And I will blame a case of COVID post vacation, but it's not the best excuse. It's the one I'm working with today. So
It's your penalty for going on vacation.
there you go.
All right. Anyone have anything else?
While we're waiting, we did not get feedback on the year 1 assessment increase. We had put in an initial figure in the discussion prior to the forecast, but that obviously is not set in stone. So if anybody's interested in weighing in on that, we don't have to do that now, Mr. Chair. And we can easily model a range of options on that for your consideration. Probably shouldn't have opened that up.
That's a big can to open up right now. That's. Let's table that one.
So I'm curious, so are we going to, I'm not actually able to stay for the session. I think it's being recorded. Are we going to adjourn or do I just say I need to leave now? You're on mute.
Rookie doing this, and that's what happens. It's part of the meeting, so we're not adjourning, but you can.
That makes sense.
Yeah, bail out.
Okay,
It is a
thanks.
voluntary
Thanks,
training, and we'll provide materials and other opportunities for folks who are interested. So we appreciate
Thanks
those
so
who can
much.
stay. Acknowledge those who need to depart.
Thank you, Nancy. Okay.
Colin, are we reaching out to Noah at all? See if we can get him on.
I did.
Okay.
And here they are.
Here they
Great.
come.
I'm actually gonna stop the recording and start it again, so we have two different files.
Okay.
So don't say anything.